Castle. After dark. For weeks he has been looking forward to it. The chance to see his favorite castle, Castle Waterside, at night. Almost every week you can find Mark here. The staff knows him well by now. For hours at a time he gets lost in all the rooms, fantasizing about the rich history of the fortress. With surprise, he looks at the entrance. There's just a small amount of people gathered around. He was expecting lots of guests. There aren't many visitors, are there? Marlene, who's manning the till, shakes her head with disappointment. We were expecting more people. Still, I hope you'll have a great evening. Thanks, I'm sure I will. Accompanied by soft classical music and candlelight, he strolls through the palace. He's enjoying every moment. From time to time he runs into people dressed in fancy costumes. They're hired by the foundation that operates the castle. There are also moments he's completely alone in a room, like now. Or, hi. Startled, Mark looks up. Jesus, where did you come from? A boy of around his age, not unattractive, smiles at him. He's dressed in a beautiful costume. Mark thinks it's from around the 18th century. Sorry I startled you, I didn't mean to. My name is Sebastian van Ophoven, at your service. He makes a funny reverence. Mark laughs. Hi, I'm Mark. You play your role well. Sebastian frowns at Mark. Then he shrugs it off and smiles. Do you like the castle? Yes, it's beautiful. So different at night. There's more atmosphere. But it's also creepier. Shadows everywhere. I come here often, but during daytime. I know, I've seen you around. Surprised, Mark looks at him. Really? I've never seen you. Sebastian smiles mysteriously. Want a tour? I know some fun stories. The next hour, Mark discovers one surprise after another. Sebastian really knows a lot about the history of the building. He talks about secret rooms, hidden hallways, unknown doors, and lost people. While one story makes Mark shiver, another makes him sad. Yet another makes him laugh out loud. He has the best time ever. During a short break, while Mark is studying a painting, Sebastian looks up. I think people are coming. Mark looks at the door and he kindly smiles at the couple that enters. It's the Count and Countess, or in this case, manager Henry Beckers and his wife Karina, who are entering the room. Hello Mark, I see you're paying our castle another visit. Yes, it's lovely, and the guide I had tonight is awesome. He knows so much about the building. Henry raises an eyebrow. Guide? Who are you talking about? Sebastian. He turns around but finds out that the boy has disappeared. With surprise he stares at the couple. He was just here. About my age, slightly bigger, black hair, dark eyes. He was dressed in a beautiful costume, if I'm not mistaken, 18th century. It was really gorgeous. Henry narrows his eyes. Sebastian, you said? Follow me. Mark follows the couple into a small room bathing in light after the click of a button. The manager slides a cloth of painting and beckons Mark to join him. When Mark sees the sad-looking boy on the painting, he widens his eyes. That's impossible. He doesn't know much about art. He does know that the boy looks exactly like Sebastian. He also notices the painting must be centuries old. These two facts combined are impossible though. He knows that much. This is Sebastian van Ophoven. He only got to be 22 years old. Well, to be correct, after his 22nd birthday he disappeared from record. No one knows what happened to him. Mark is stunned. But I just saw him. Talk to him. This is impossible. He looks at Henry, then his wife. They smile comforting. You were lucky. He only shows himself to a select few. I've never had the pleasure of meeting him. I have to get out of here. I want to go outside. He storms past the concerned couple and runs out of the door. At the gate, Mark wants to exit the property. Suddenly the gate slams shut. Hello Mark, leaving so soon? Terrified, Mark turns around and finds himself staring at Sebastian's face. I see you figured it out. Don't be afraid of me, I won't harm you. Mark is still speechless. When Sebastian steps forward, Mark recoils. Sebastian puts his hand on Mark's shoulder. Mark shivers at the cold touch. Sebastian grins. Sorry, I always forget I'm not hot-blooded anymore. I beg of you, Mark, don't fear me. He stares Mark in the eyes. Inexplicably, Mark notices how his fear is suddenly replaced by sadness. A very deep sadness. A tear rolls down his cheek. Softly, Sebastian wipes it away. What happened to you? Who are you? Are you really a ghost? Mark whispers. Hundreds of questions flood his mind. Sebastian smiles softly. Come back inside. He shivers. It's cold out here. I'll explain everything there. Silently they walk back to the castle, both lost in their own thoughts. How can I be sure you're really a ghost, not some fraud? Ghost? How about presence? Sounds better, right? Besides, I never harmed anyone. Ghosts sound so negative and scary. Follow me. They step back inside and stop by a great long wall. Did you know this was the entrance to the Great Hall before? Mark shakes his head. You only see the wall, right? Mark nods. I see that wall too, but I also see the old door. And I can still open the door and pass through. Sebastian steps forward and is gone. Mark gasps for breath. This is impossible, he cries out. Besides, I can show up anywhere I want. With a cry, Mark jumps and turns around. Sebastian grins at him. How did you do that? How can you just appear behind me? Well, being a ghost has its benefits. Being a presence, you mean? Mark laughs, despite everything. He notices how good it feels after all the tension. I'm glad you're not afraid anymore. Mark shrugs. If you wanted to hurt me, I suppose you'd already have done it. But are you really Sebastian van Ophoven? Sebastian nods. What happened to you? I understand you disappeared after your 22nd birthday. Sebastian's gaze darkens. I am Sebastian van Ophoven. And if you really want to know what happened to me, I'll tell you. Follow me. Mark follows Sebastian to a room on the top floor. I was born in 1795. When I disappeared in 1817, I was 22 years old. Mark gasps. What a coincidence! I was born in 1995 and I'm 22 now in 2017. Sebastian grins. So we're the same age, give or take a couple of centuries. They burst out laughing. Then Sebastian continues his story. These were my rooms. My parents thought I was weird. They all wanted rooms downstairs while I chose these upstairs. He smiles softly. I found them more cozy. Mark looks at him with amazement. Oh yes, we cared about comfort, don't forget. I was part of the upper class. We didn't have much to do. Sebastian answers Mark's gaze. Then he continues. Everything was going well, until I met Anton. He was the stable boy, and so gorgeous. He was the most beautiful boy I'd ever met. We instantly felt an attraction to each other. I quickly fell deeply in love with him, and he with me. We were so happy together, even though we had to hide for everyone. Sebastian stares at Mark. Of course, homosexuality existed in my days. We just didn't have a name for it yet. And the people were convinced homosexuals were possessed by the devil. One evening we agreed to meet in the stables. Soon we found ourselves in the warm hay. I bet you can imagine what we were doing. Mark turns red while Sebastian laughs. Right, that, he chuckles. Suddenly my dad and the manager of the estate entered the stable. When my dad saw us in the hay, he became furious. You are possessed by the devil. I curse you. You're not my son anymore. He called for some guards and they dragged me to my room. They locked me up and from my window I could see... His voice falters. The memories are too painful and Mark looks outside. He sees the courtyard of the castle. Sebastian regains control and looks at Mark with sad eyes. I could watch them behead Anton. Mark stares at him with wide eyes. He looks down again, at the courtyard that looks so peaceful now, but where 2 centuries ago something so horrible happened. They beheaded him? But he was worthless, just a stable boy. I was the son of the Count. If story would get out... He looks at Mark with a void look in his eyes. You can imagine the manager got a big raise. He takes a moment to compose himself and deal with the memories flooding him. Then he continues. One day I managed to outsmart a guard. I opened the window, hid behind the door, and as soon as the guard entered he saw the empty room and the open window. Of course he immediately would run to the open window to look down. I used that moment, ran outside and locked the door behind me. I ran to the tower and climbed all the way up. No one ever went there. Afraid for what will follow, Mark wants to shut his ears, but his curiosity wins. I found a thick rope, threw it over the beam and, overcome with emotion, Sebastian lowers his head, not capable to carry on with his story. Mark sits down next to him, defying the icy chill that emanates from Sebastian, and puts his arm around the other boy. Take your time. Thankful, Sebastian looks at him. You look just like him, you know. You look like Anton, just as cute and sweet. He kisses Mark's cheek. Mark feels Sebastian's lips. They are cold, yet the kiss feels warm. Sebastian takes Mark's hand, so I grabbed the thick rope, threw it over the beam and tied it around my neck. Then I jumped. A deafening silence follows. Mark is overwhelmed by Sebastian's suffering. Sebastian is thrown back in time as he recalls all his misery. Once he calms down, he continues. Next thing I remember is seeing me hang there, for weeks, in the middle of summer. Mark tries imagining. Summer, for weeks. He shivers. There couldn't be much left of you, he mutters. He startles himself and blushes. I didn't mean to say that out loud. Sebastian smiles grimly. No, not much. The poor guard who discovered me was scared to death. He saw my decomposing body and threw up over his shoes. Then he sent for my father. Sebastian sighs. My father was still convinced I was possessed by the devil. He refused to give me a proper burial. Instead of a funeral, he had me braked in. Here in the castle. In the castle? So your body, my skeleton. My skeleton is still buried in the walls somewhere. And I'm cursed to haunt this place until my skeleton gets found and buried with dignity. Where? Where is your skeleton? I want to help you. That's kind of you, but they're not going to break open a wall just because you saw a ghost. Maybe they won't, but maybe they will. It's worth a try, right? With doubt, Sebastian stares at him. Then he smiles. Okay, I'll show you where my skeleton is. Really, you have to believe me. Mark looks at Henry pleadingly. So Sebastian's skeleton is behind this wall? But how? He shakes his head. The story Mark just told him is hard to believe. Well, he didn't see Sebastian last night. It's daytime now, and even Mark starts doubting his story. It couldn't have been a dream, could it? Please, you remember last night? I saw Sebastian. I told you. You showed me the painting of him. He told me he can't find peace until his remains are buried. You have to help me. Help him. Mark's desperation isn't lost on Henry. Finally he sighs and beckons some workmen in a room next to them. Can you drill a hole here? Just a small hole to determine whether there's a hollow space behind this wall. The workmen nod, surprised, and start drilling. Eventually they shoot forward. There is a hollow space, one of them cries out. Mark's heart jumps. Relief, fear, happiness, all emotions flood through him. Henry uses a flashlight to light up the space. Then he jumps back. This is impossible, he whispers. Then he cries out, This wall must be removed, get more people. Quickly the room is filled with workmen and in less than an hour the wall is gone. There is a serene silence as they stare at the skeleton in front of them. You were right. We have found Sebastian van Ophoven after 2 centuries. Finally we know his fate, whispers a breathless Henry. He stares at Mark with wonder. With a sad smile on his face, Mark looks at the hidden skeleton in the wall. The skeleton of a young count's son who had to pay with his life for loving a stable boy. It's a chilly, drizzly, late summer afternoon. A small gathering of people is standing next to a freshly dug grave. Mark has convinced them to dig it apart from the rest of the family. A pastor is reciting some lines of the Bible, although Mark is sure Sebastian couldn't care less. Henry insisted though. There isn't much else said. A tear rolls down Mark's cheek until he sees movement out of the corner of his eye. He turns slowly and gasps for breath. Two smiling boys stare at him. One of them is Sebastian. The other, well, it must be Anton. Sebastian bows to him. "Thank you," his lips say. He looks at Anton and points at him proudly. It's as if he wants to say, "Look at him. This is him. This is my Anton." He kisses Anton lovingly and the boys wave at him. Slowly they disappear. Mark looks at the grave again. A sense of happiness overflows him. Sebastian and Anton have found each other again. They're not alone anymore. But what about him? His gaze meets a boy across the grave who smiles at him. He smiles back. Well, maybe he won't be alone for much longer.